You're now tuned into the hottest podcast in the world, the Stay Woke Podcast, right here on the SonicBreakdown.com.
Man, it's time to wake up. Get this cake up. Only thing I care about is switching.
Welcome back to another Stay Woke Podcast. This is DeRa Brinson. And you know the Stay Woke Podcast is presented by the SonicBreakdown.com. So head over there and check out our latest review or article up. And today we're going to do another Let's Talk About It segment. And, you know, if we do a Let's Talk About It segment, we're going to be interviewing somebody very interesting. And so today's person that we're going to be interviewing today is going to be the Olympian from this year's Winter Olympics, member of the Jamaican bobsled team, Jazmine Fenlator-Victorian. So, once again, so what part of New Jersey did you grow up in?
I grew up in North Jersey. Not many people know, but Jersey's like north, south. What exit are you on the Parkway? So I'm definitely from 157B, Way, New Jersey. Grew up most of my childhood there until I went to college.
Did you have any siblings, brothers, sisters?
Yeah, I have a younger sister. Her name is Angelica, significantly younger. We're about 9 years apart. So she's in her early 20s now, which is interesting for me to see.
And how was that growing up with having a sister so far apart?
Well, I kind of grew up as an only child, and then even when she was born, I was in a different stage of my adolescence than she was. So it's interesting to look how your parents kind of soften up as time goes by, as well as understanding that technology and social norms have changed, especially in, 9 years, in a decade pretty much between us. So now that we're both adults, it's a lot better for us to relate to different things, for me to shed some light on my experiences, and as well as we can hang out a little bit more on the same playing field of what our interests are.
Did she do sports or anything like that? And did she go down the same kind of athletic realm that you did, or?
She actually chose not to. She dabbled in it a little bit. She enjoyed it, but she kind of wanted to find her own thing. She's very, very creative. She studied at a Votech school, culinary arts. She also pretty much went all the way with cosmetology. She just has to take her state test. And she's done some really nice artwork. She really enjoyed art class, even though she didn't necessarily want to be an artist. So she definitely has a creative edge to her, which is awesome.
What about your parents? What do your parents do?
Oh, my mom, she kind of dabbled in everything. She didn't get a college education until my sister was about 2 years old, in her late 30s. So my mom did culinary stuff and was certified. She was certified accountant. She was really good at information systems with computers. And towards the latter part, before she ended up retiring, she was doing promotional items, kind of helping be that middle person between a corporation and their clients, finding the best promotion and marketing tools. My dad's a butcher. He's always done labor trades. So in Jamaica, he was a mechanic. He grew up on a farm. He's done carpentry work, and for the last, I want to say for sure 25 years, if not more, he's been a butcher in New Jersey, and probably one of the best for the company he works for. But he likes to not have the pressure of doing management and just go to work and come home. So
No, that's understandable. Are both of your parents from Jamaica?
No, just my father is. My mom is European descent, so actually her grandmother immigrated to the United States when she was young.
Okay. What were some of your passions as a youth in high school and things? What were some of the things that you did like to get into outside of sports and athletics?
I actually really wasn't introduced to me personally doing athletics until high school. Okay. I was really into music and more of the liberal arts scene. And my first activity was dance school. About the time I turned 5, maybe a little bit before. And I became very, very competitive in it. Traveled all across America for national competitions. Did tryouts for Broadway, for commercials, for movies. And that was kind of my thing. I wanted to write our congressmen and tell them that they should fight for dance to be in the Olympics, because rhythmic gymnastics and gymnastics were, so why couldn't dance be considered a sport? And that's kind of how I fell in that line, or that mentality, I guess, of the Olympics and athletics, that route.
Gotcha. And so to me would seem that would give you and your sister something to kind of bond over, that creative,
Yeah, for sure. My undergrad, my bachelor's degree is in graphic design and advertising. So I definitely, and when she was dabbling into her art side and experimenting, I was also taking some art classes in college. So we definitely have that mind of creativity and kind of searching which is the best way to express it for both of us, as well as we're willing to try new and different things as well. So.
And you said, you started the sports scene in high school. What was kind of the impetus behind that? What pushed you in that direction?
So I had to stop taking dance classes at such a high level because my mom lost her job because she didn't have a college education. So at the time, the governor, as well as I believe it was President Clinton, kind of had a thing for people that were older looking to get educated from associates to their bachelor's. If they went to a county school, basically the government would pay for it and they would just have to pay for their books or extracurriculars. So my mom basically was like, okay, I think it's time. I've been kind of fighting this system for a while of not having education, always being the first one to be laid off, even though I'm the best at my job, all because of a piece of paper. So she, obviously, college tuition and bills and things are much more of a priority than dance classes. And that was about the time I was in middle school transitioning to high school. So I decided to take my dance skills to the gymnastics team because I could do some backflips and some cool stuff as well. And one of my really good friends was on the gymnastics team. So she was like, yeah, I'm going to talk to the coach. No problem. Did that. And in gym class, or physical education, if you want to be politically correct, my teacher at the time, Mr. Bannett, who I still talk to and is still at my high school, he was teaching freshman phys ed class, and it was kind of like a smorgasbord for the first semester. You kind of introduced different sports every 2 weeks. So for 2 weeks we did baseball, 2 weeks we did this sport, 2 weeks we did this, kind of just to give those kids that weren't really exposed to athletics and different things just a well-rounded view. Mm-hmm. And track and field was on there. So I threw the shot put farther than him. It bruised his ego, and he told me to come out for the track team. And so I wanted to stay active, and my friend that was in gymnastics was doing track as well. So I said, oh, sure, why not? I'll always have a ride home. I'll have some friends to do it with. And I actually didn't compete not once my whole freshman year. Oh, wow. In track until like very, very late in the outdoor season, and I broke the school record. So oh, wow. From then on, they were pursuing me to quit dance, the dance club and gymnastics, and just be a track athlete. And it took me about 2 more years to take it seriously and see that I could have a college scholarship for it. And my direction of dreaming to go to the Olympics changed to track.
And what was the thing that made you get serious? Was it the prospect of going to the Olympics, the prospect of how good you were at it, or was it just that dance was further away from grasp than this was?
I'd have to give it to my coaches / teachers at Wayne Valley High School, who are still there, Mr. Bannett, Mr. Slater, and a few of the others that were all pretty much nonchalantly having conversation with me, wanted to know where my direction was and why I was part of the team and what I wanted to do. And I was like, well, I want to go to college, but it's expensive. I need a scholarship for sure. And academics is so competitive these days. It doesn't matter if you have, a 4.0 GPA or this. It's all about your extracurriculars. So they kind of said, well, what about track? That could be an avenue for you. And they kind of pointed out that if you're capable of qualifying for some major major track meets and hitting these kind of elite standards, and you're not 100% in track. Imagine what you could be if you hyper-focused more on track and on this direction and put all your eggs in one basket, because spreading it out makes you well-rounded, but at the same time, you have a real shot at doing something special. So that's kind of what persuaded me to more focus on track, as well as they said, you always talk about the Olympics, and you're not going to go to the Olympics for dance or gymnastics because you're 5'9" and well past the gymnastic size. So that's kind of what pushed me in that direction. And their support, like whatever you decide, that's all well and good, but we see a lot of potential in you, and we would hate for this potential to be wasted.
I got you. So a master of one instead of a jack of all trades. I
Yeah.
What about your experience at Rider University for track? How was that experience transitioning from high school to college?
It was really interesting. The town I grew up in is fairly diverse, but at the same time, it's not diverse. It's very cookie cutter. It's a very upscale town. Like I was going to school with in my parents' car that was like, you got to hand roll the windows up. Sometimes you have to, you got to like tweak the antenna to get the radio working and different things. And kids senior year were driving up in a brand new Cobra or even a Mercedes or BMW or Escalade, and that just was not how I grew up. I was on the other side of town, or on the other side of the tracks, as you can say. So as much as that town has a lot of diversity of, especially over the past almost 20 years now, because I graduated in 2003. So almost 20 years now, 15 for sure. Kids and their families are kind of immigrating from the big city lifestyle, especially New York, Philadelphia, and kind of using New Jersey as that suburb feel, but it's close to the city. So now our towns are a little bit more diverse and even more overpopulated for a suburb. And when I went to college, it was way more diverse. When I graduated high school, my graduating class, there was only 3 of us that were black, and 2 of us were mixed, and 1 was all black. So now I go to college, and I'm walking to my classes, and I'm like, man, 1 in 1 of us is black. This is crazy.
Yeah, a totally different experience.
Yeah, so I think going to school, it was a very similar feel of the town I grew up in. It was in the southern area, so it was closer to Philadelphia, so had a little bit different culture of North Jersey versus South Jersey, and it was diverse, but I'd say not much change except for opening. Like, I appreciated that I could have had a car on campus if I had one. Freshman year, my parents were like, nope, every other university that you apply to, freshmen aren't allowed to have cars on campus. We want you to stick in it. If you need to go somewhere, there's bus money, there's trains, there's this, but you need to engulf yourself into the environment you're in and not be able to just like escape. You kind of have to grow up. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, immerse yourself in the whole experience.
Yeah, and so I appreciated that, and it opened me up to living with lots and lots of different types of people, being exposed to those different cultures and how we all kind of get along together.
Do you think that experience helped prepare you for your experience of culture melding at the Olympics?
I think that experience helped me for when I moved on in my athletic career, and you're put in close quarters for months at a time away from home, so you have to share a bathroom, you have to share a living space. Not all of your teammates are going to like the same music as you. not everyone likes the same food. Some people are very vanilla, as I call it, potatoes, meat, salt, pepper. I'm a person, I like some curry, some hot sauce, give me some coconut milk. I
mix
like
it up
flavor.
a little bit, yeah.
Yeah, but it allows you to it helped me to understand, and as well as it's a platform to educate people. If people are so used to vanilla or they're so used to this, and then they may meet you who's kind of both spectrums mixed together, and often hard for people to understand how that's possible, and you expose them to different things culturally. I just think that makes the world a better place, more tolerance, more acceptance. Hopefully someone met me one day and was like, oh, so I could do this too, or this isn't just for these type of people. No, nothing is just for these type of people. So I think it helped me also be able to speak more about it as I got to the Olympic Games and the values behind it.
Okay. And what was the decision behind switching from track to bobsled?
That wasn't really planned in any means, actually. I spent my whole collegiate career with a long-term and a short-term plan of goals and where I wanted to go, and the idea to be an Olympic track and field athlete, especially field events, until recently haven't really been known as well for Black people to excel at, especially the throwing events. So shout out to those athletes who've made history in the last 2 Olympics by medaling. That's amazing, because it's usually predominantly been European owned with the records and the medals. So that was a goal of mine, and my coach knew it. But someone approached him saying, hey, maybe Jazz would be good at bobsled. I've heard track and field athletes cross over. When I was an athlete, I went to a tryout, and she's far better than me, so maybe you should look into it. My coach at the time, Coach Pasquarello, has a very awesome sense of humor, so I thought he brought it up just to make fun of me for Cool Runnings, and kind of brushed it aside. And then he said, no, take me seriously. I'd really like for you to research it. Here's some of the information. He asked me if I researched. I said yes. And then he said, what are your thoughts? And I'm like, well, I'm working on NCAAs here. I have job interviews coming up because my goal is to also have a job by the time I graduate in the next few months. I sound all well and good, and he's like, well, I already put an athletic resume in for you, so you should hear back from the national team soon. And I did. So I went to a tryout. I actually couldn't go. We tried to organize it around my track meets, but obviously I'm on a scholarship, and these are immediate goals, and risking injury to do something like that wasn't on our agenda. So I just emailed them saying to keep me in mind in the future. Actually got a job with Johnson & Johnson before graduation, signed for my start date to be early September so that I could finally have a summer to myself and hang out, find a place to live, all that good stuff. And I'd say mid-August, early to mid-August, the national bobsled team for USA asked me to come to a tryout. That was literally right before my first day at work. So everyone was like, this is a sign, like you should go. You get back from the tryout the 9th, your first day of work is the 10th. This is perfect. So of course, with my mom's support, she was like, you don't want to ever say woulda, coulda, shoulda. Like if you go, it doesn't work out, it's not what you're up for, you're not the athlete they're looking for, that's no harm done for you. At least you went and you tried. Versus if you never go and then you're sitting 4 years later seeing girls that you beat in track and field or something in the Olympics, you're going to think back. So
yeah, you don't want to live with regret.
Yeah, so I went. They asked me to come back, and pretty much that's history. I never left the sport since 2007.
And so how was that for you as an athlete, of a track athlete, of just transitioning from being on the track to being on the ice?
To be honest, the whole ice thing and running on ice, you have spikes that kind of grip just like track spikes. So it's not like the movie when you're watching Cool Runnings and all of a sudden they're basically running in sneakers on ice, which is not what we do. So the transition that way is not steep or anything or very different. What it is climatizing. You're so used to warming up indoors or in warm weather, and now everything is blue collar in bobsled. There's no indoor facility. If it's minus 30 for the race, you are outside warming up in minus 30 with a face mask on, looking like an Eskimo. We do everything manually ourselves. So if the sled needs to be moved to the line, it's you and your teammates moving the sled. There's no NASCAR pit crew where you just say, chop, chop, guys, I'm going off at this time. My stuff needs to be ready by this time. Like, it's all you. So, I thought about track and field, the amount of hours and training that go in for, 30 seconds inside a hammer circle, or sometimes 15 seconds for what people, sprint or run in, or which include setting up blocks. And then I really realized how much time goes into something for 1 minute on ice, and it can be 16-hour days by the time you're working on your equipment. You're the mechanic, you're doing all of that. Plus, you, as a pilot, I have to study the track. At the time, I wasn't a pilot. I started off as a brakeman, but
okay, that's what
I have to learn.
That was one of the things I was wondering, is like that aspect of it, as well as being the pilot. Like, that's something you don't have to think about necessarily in track. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know where to go. You just go.
Yeah, so even transitioning to a pilot, whether you start right away or not, all the basics of bobsled, you still have to learn. So it works out if you can be a brakeman at least for a year to learn the equipment, learn how to take care of it, travel to different bobsleigh tracks and not have that pressure in conjunction while you're learning all of that, of making it down safely and memorizing the tracks. So I started driving 3 years into the sport. So I was already traveled around the North American tracks. I already kind of knew which way the corners went, right, left. I already knew the basics of the equipment and how to take care of it and prepare. So when I started driving, it was a whole nother learning curve, but I didn't also have to learn the sport itself, bobsleigh.
What kept you going on to after you made that transition, when you hit those tough, difficult times, especially, after you done track for so long, where you already knew the sport, to now going to a new sport where you have to learn it all over again? What was your driving force, or your driving motivating factor?
To be honest, I think at that time in my career, it was the Olympics. I started bobsleigh in the 2007-2008 season, and the Olympics were in Vancouver, which is as close to home field advantage as we could get in 2010. So the turnaround was not so far away. Team USA Women just came off of the silver medal, and we had a lot of promising athletes, pilots. So I think that driving force of the Olympic movement, that Olympic dream, what it means, representing your country, representing your family, your friends, and pushing yourself. I'm extremely competitive. I like to try different things, and I hate when people say it's not possible or it can't be done. So it was easy for me when people said, man, you're crazy, for that to just be 10 times more motivation.
And then what led to the switch from Team USA to Team Jamaica?
So I didn't make the 2010 games, and that's when I transitioned to being a pilot, and I put in my long-term goals that I will be in Sochi, which I was. So I represented USA in the Sochi Olympics. So after those Olympics, I kind of went through a lot of people don't really talk about it, and I was warned that it would happen. You kind of go through depression, like a down space, because you've worked, especially after your first games, you've worked so hard. Usually for most people, it's not like this Olympic dream just came to them. They've had this desire for most of their life. So it seems, or most of their life while doing sports. So if it's not been your whole life, it's been pretty much your whole athletic career that you've been eyeing the Olympics or pushing towards them or training for them. And you get there, and in 2 weeks, you're like on this amazing high, taking pictures, opening ceremony. It doesn't matter if you win a gold medal and get the world record or you come in dead last. After the games, those 2 weeks, it's like you fly home, and now what? Man, do I want to train another 4 years for this? What do I do? I got bills to pay, especially winter sports. Winter sports are not like summer sports where a lot of these athletes are already professionals. So when they go home, they already know they have some type of security in the professional state of the sport. You come home from bobsleigh and there's no professional income coming in, like, the season's done, no more health insurance, no more income, no more stipend. You could fall off the face of the earth. It wouldn't even matter. So it kind of was in a place of, what does this all mean? What do I want to do? Do I want to keep going 4 years? I wasn't really happy with my performance, which was kind of digging at me a little bit. And I kind of was in this middle space of, you know what, I'm going to take it day by day. And then I decided, okay, I'm going to train for the next season. My main goal for the next season with USA, because I still was training with them, and on that team, was to have fun and to remember why I love the sport and why I pushed so hard. And if that ends up being my last season, I'll go out with a bang my way, and it doesn't really matter the performance. Although I'm competitive and I want a good performance, I'm not going to let that define my career. That's when I met my husband, and it ended up being my best season. I was 3rd overall in the World Cup, 6th at World Championship, top 4 every race.
Oh, wow.
Was really, really great. So coming off of not my best performance at the games, even though to say 11th place isn't good at the Olympics is, no one should say that.
Yeah, that's what I say.
If you were at
you made it.
In my opinion, if you went to the Olympics and you competed and you gave it your all, it is what it is. It doesn't matter the place. There's only 3 spots for medals. That doesn't mean everyone under that didn't have their own battle, So I put that into perspective as well. And even though I was having these great results, my husband was kind of like, something's missing. Like, what do you want to do? Like, why are you still bobsledding? You accomplished everything. I'm like, nah, I didn't get a medal. And he's like, yeah, but is that, like, really what's going to make the difference for you? And I was like, no. I mean, if you can't be who you are without it, like, what does it matter if you have it?
Yeah.
So he said, okay, so, like, what do you want to do while still bobsledding or with bobsleigh? Like, what is your legacy? And I started thinking about it, and I said, we need more participation in this sport for women. We need more diversity, and it shouldn't be, this is bobsleigh, so it's just a European sport, basically like a white person sport with money from Europe. That's not how it should be. It's an Olympic event. That means it's accessible and can be accessible to whoever wants to do it. So that's when he kind of was like, have you ever talked to Jamaica going back home? And I said, they asked me when I was going for my first Olympics in 2010 if I would come out. But at the time, I was in a development program with Team USA. They had a structured program. Things were set up, and I didn't feel that I was at the level of knowledge in the sport to do something from the ground up. So we decided not to. And he goes, well, I think you should consider it or think about it. And I did, and I sat on it, trained all summer, basically. And then I emailed a good friend, the president of the federation, and said, hey, remember that time you guys, asked me if I would come home to Team Jamaica? Is that still on the table? I know you guys may have gone in a different direction, or the season is approaching, so whatever funding you have is already, designated to athletes that have been there. But I'd really like to do this if it's still available. And of course, with open arms, They didn't even blink. Yeah, they were interested in doing a women's program, and the president of the federation, Mr. Chris Stokes, his daughter, Natalia, Tally we call her, was actually doing some driving schools and sliding here and there. But she was also in university, so to do it full time, as well as she didn't really grow up in athletics. She grew up around it, but she was more of a swimmer.
Okay.
It was going to take some time to develop. So when I came, I said, I'm serious about this. I'm a full-time bobsledder, so what do we need to do to kickstart this women's program? Because it is going to be 30 years after the original team, and it's important to show our progress as a nation. And we've worked, throughout the years with a lot of hardships, but we can do something special.
And how do you think the reception for what you're trying to do and what they're trying to do was?
I think clearly we were on the same page because it ended up working out. We as Jamaicans don't really sugarcoat anything. We're going to tell you straight up. So if it wasn't something that was in their line of interest at the moment, they would have said, no, we're cool with just a men's team. That's our legacy. That's our vibe. But I also know that wasn't the case because they approached me long ago asking if I would come back home to Jamaica. So I knew that it was a possibility. It was just a matter of funds, finding brakemen. I knew it was going to be a struggle. We're a small nation team that really is only known for, track and field, football, and cricket, for popularity's sake and success. And businesses, when you're from a tropical nation, it's hard to advertise using bobsleigh when you don't experience any of that climate.
Yeah, that is a hard sell. What do you think about your experience with the U.S. team versus your experience with the Jamaican team?
What's funny is I was trying to describe to someone basically the difference, and it didn't matter. It doesn't matter what team you're on, whether you're from a large nation team, a small nation team, big budget team, small budget team. You're gonna have some of the same issues, but the difference is think of the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. Like, he grew up in Philly, not with money, kind of, super creative. If you don't got it, you make it or you find a way, and that's Team Jamaica. But like Bel-Air with his uncle, that's Team USA. You know what I mean? And some of their hardships that they were facing as being a black family in Bel-Air is not something that Will, like being from Philly, would ever really understand, because he's looking at them like, I see you have a 6,000 square foot house, like 5 cars. I don't understand why not getting into this club at school is really hurting your feelings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I would say those are the differences. Team USA has its own issues because it's one of the only teams that has no federal backing for the Olympics. It's all privately funded. It's all from the USOC getting private donations or linking with sponsorships privately. Nothing comes from the government. No health insurance, no support, no athlete programs through the government. And that's one of the hardships as Team USA has to face compared to Team Germany, Team Canada, and other big nations that have financial support. On the other side, on Team USA, we're real quick to say, oh, we need a physio. We don't have a physio. We only have a chiropractor. And on Team Jamaica, we're just trying to be able to go to the doctor if we get sick, So there's sometimes we got bigger fish to fry than what other teams might complain about or feel like they need. And I will say I grew up more like my team being on Team Jamaica, so it wasn't anything new to me. It wasn't anything of a shock. It wasn't difficult in the sense to transition from that team to that team. What I wanted to do is bring my knowledge of being with a large team, being successful, being at the Sochi Olympics, to my teammates who haven't had that experience, and see what I could do within our team process as Team Jamaica to help make it more accurate, more fluid, more competitive. And at the end of the day, if that's, all that I brought to the team and ended up not qualifying for the games, that to me was still a win for the progress of us as a nation.
I want to touch on a little bit more about the diversity in the games, especially in bobsledding. What was your experience with the diversity?
It's, someone actually wrote to me and said I was racist based on my comments I made in a press conference at the Pyeongchang Olympics about representation and seeing people that look like me. And I think what they don't understand, and I'm not going to fault them for their own ignorance, is that when it's not about white or black or this or that and choosing a side, because I'm mixed and I've never been brought up to choose I'm this part of myself or only this part. I've always been raised and taught to encompass everything of my uniqueness. And it's interesting enough that on Team USA, we have a mixed team. People have come from Hawaii, people come from the north, the south, dark skin, light skin, brown, orange, whatever you want to call it, on our team. But in general, it's a different sense. Like Team Jamaica, we have Chinese Jamaicans, we have Japanese Jamaicans, we have Indian Jamaicans, and not once on our island do people say, "Oh, I'm from Indian descent." If you're a Jamaican, you're a Jamaican, period. And that's the difference of being on Team Jamaica as a nation is, yeah, we have diversity. We're a melting pot. In fact, on our country crest, our shield, it says, "Out of many, we are one people." And we truly embody that. We are Jamaican, period. There's no, I'm half this, I'm half that, or I'm this or I'm that. You're just Jamaican, where it's very different, when you come from or you grow up in the United States. You're Japanese American, you're African American, you're Mexican American. And that was something that I was looking for, as well as thought that it was such a great thing and movement that it should be pushed more internationally. The Olympic Games for 2 weeks, we're representing our countries, we're representing where we come from and who we are, but at the same time, we're all athletes. We're just athletes trying to compete and be the best possible for 2 weeks, embracing all different sides of what athleticism is and where all the athletes come from.
Because again, the idea of understanding how it felt with the Jamaican team versus the U.S. team, you only can know that through hindsight. But did you feel like you noticed the lack of universal diversity when you were at the Sochi Olympics in 2014?
Yeah, what was interesting is when I was at the Sochi Olympics, those were stated, obviously it was prior to Pyeongchang, that those were stated to be one of the most diverse Winter Olympics in the history of the Winter Olympics, let alone so with Team USA, specifically the women's bobsled team, brought in some of the majority of the diversity, because out of 6 athletes, 5 of us were diverse outside of the norm, or outside of, quote, what someone would say the majority is Caucasian. So we spoke a lot about it at those Sochi Games, but what's funny to me is going into Pyeongchang, although it said it was one of the most diverse Olympic Games, on the contrary, Team USA at that point was the least diverse it's been in an Olympic Games in a very long time. And that was interesting to me to see that and hear about that. But going around these games when you're with a small nation, I saw Team Togo, I saw Team Ghana, I saw Team Nigeria, I saw Team Colombia, all during the opening ceremonies, and I was so excited. I saw Team Tonga, which, my husband's Polynesian, so that was amazing for me to see. 2 years ago, I just saw that athlete walk into the opening ceremonies in Rio, and because he wanted so hard to prove that he could do winter sports and do that for his nation, 2 years later, he literally made it the last race of the cutoff to go to Pyeongchang. And he's wearing, again, it didn't matter that it was minus 30 degrees out. He wore his traditional Tonga outfit and represented his culture in the opening ceremonies and closing ceremonies. So seeing all of those things was really, really awesome at Pyeongchang, and seeing how Korea and eventually the rest of the world embraced all of that, especially when you're trading pins. Pins is like trading money. So at the Olympics, so when you have like a Jamaica bobsleigh pin, that's a hot commodity, and everyone wants one. And when you're from a small, rare nation, because who knows, maybe Team Colombia won't have someone represented at the next games. It's no guarantee, so it tends to be a hot commodity. It's not like a Team Norway or
Sweden,
Team Germany, or Team Canada, where yep, they're going every winter because they have, winter sports delegation and history of it.
I think that is amazing. Those moments are great to see. How do you think that affects society to be able to see those moments? And do you also think that those moments will continue moving forward? I think the press did a great job as best that they could, because I know also the media, you look for drama. That's what sells. That's what gives you ratings. And the past two Olympics, there hasn't really been significant drama, which, for us as athletes is amazing, because then we get to focus on doing the job that we're there to focus on. But I think they did a really good job these Olympics, and I can only speak from my experience in the venue and the village that I was staying at, of exposing a lot of the positives. Team Nigeria is one of the, and Team Ghana, for the sliding sports, it's the first time that the African continent was represented, and that's huge. That is so huge, especially, bobsled is a very, very old sport. It was originated in Switzerland, and now you have two different countries in Africa that are exposed to bobsled and skeleton now, and they're holding testing camps. So I think overall, the experience in getting that positive publicity really showed, one, it shows the support of people who come from that descent but weren't born in the country. So you have the people in the U.S. and Canada, even in the U.K., that are Nigerian or from Ghana or even Jamaican, and they're like, oh my gosh, big up, like, great to see my people out there. And then they start to think and have a tie and feel like they don't always have to choose, based on the country they're in versus their heritage. You can encompass both. In fact, the Ghana athlete, a good friend of mine, Akwazi, he grew up a lot of his life and schooling in the Netherlands, and he always gives back to the Netherlands, even though he's not Dutch. He considers himself Dutch. A lot of the people consider him Dutch, and although he was representing Team Ghana, his birthplace and his home, he also, paid tribute to the Dutch for their support and for helping raise him. And I think that was pretty cool as well, and should open people's eyes to it. It takes a village, right? And nowadays your village isn't just in one place. Your village is across different borders, and you don't have to pick and choose because there's a border there. You can just be who you are. What do you think that your imprint on both games and as well as in the sport for young bobsledders coming up, other women of color that might not have seen that as a sport that they could even attain to, now that they see someone like you that did make the transition into that sport? What do you think? How do you think about what does that bring to mind for you?
Yeah, I think especially being a female, a black female, and representing two countries in a sport where I think the percentage of people who could make it to the Olympics. There was a post about it, is 0.001% in the world.
Wow.
I definitely defied some odds. Not by going once, but by going twice, and by representing two completely different countries, one that's tropical and one that has a history in winter sports. But I guess the main thing for me, and I've always talked about it before Sochi, after Sochi, at Pyeongchang, is the world gets confused, and this is a generic statement, when they can't compartmentalize or put people in, or things in, boxes. You know, it's either black or it's white. Or if it's gray, it goes all the way over here and it's considered gray. But in between those three colors, especially if you're into the artistic side or have knowledge, there's different degrees of those shades completely. And my main thing is I'm going to like and listen to rap music, but that doesn't mean I don't listen to classical. So that doesn't mean I'm this type of person only. And once we are okay with being our true self and expressing our true self, we're helping to educate other people in understanding that it's okay to be different things and not just be one thing or be a label. You don't have to have any label on yourself. If you like this music at this time, you like this music. If you like this music at that time, you like that music. I was a summer sport athlete that transitioned to winter. I'm just an athlete. It doesn't mean that I have to choose, now you're a winter athlete. You can't like summer sports anymore. Go to the Summer Olympics. And I think that's what's important, is knowing that you're not defined by your circumstances, but you create your own definition of who you are. And if you don't want a definition, you don't have to have one. And that the sky is the limit. Just because you grew up in South Florida or you grew up in the Conga, you still have the same percentage of opportunity as long as you fight for it to go to the Winter Olympics. You still can be that 0.001% if you so choose to be.
Well said. Well said. What is the goals now after Pyeongchang?
Well, my husband transitioned from bobsleigh to skeleton during this season, so he is looking to train for the Beijing 2022 games. So when I came back, I actually flew straight to him after being apart for a little bit and supported him on his last training and club racing of the season. And now I have some projects non-related to bobsleigh that are in the works and trying to kind of figure some of those out. And I haven't 100% decided. Of course, I'm still competitive and have a competitive edge. And soon, probably by the end of this week, I will start doing some physical training again. But I haven't decided exactly the scope of that. I'm just taking it day by day for now. And, you know, when you train for the Olympics, you put a lot of things on hold. And you charge a lot of things on your credit card, which that needs to be paid. So I'm searching on a balance of ways for, you know, that would be best for both my husband and I to continue doing sport. And if not, what other avenues that I'd like to pursue, they are still an option for me.
Gotcha.
So just day by day.
I got you. And before we get out of here, I want to say thank you very much for the interview. Like I said, I think what you're doing and what you have done is eye-opening for the world, and it does show that, you know, that women of color in particular, especially black women, that, like you said, the fact that you defied those odds shows that, you know, we're not the stereotypes that everybody that the world wants to put on black people.
I think it's important for us to remember that we don't have to always do the "oh, poor me" card. We just have to create it for ourselves. And when we don't feel like we're valued or we're not getting equality, then, you know, that's why we have some of the best entrepreneurs, black-owned businesses, specializing in some amazing things, because, you know, what you were doing wasn't working out for you, but that doesn't mean you can't create it for yourself. Exactly.
But at the same time as well, we have to remember that, just like you said, you have to put in that work and be able to overcome those trials that you're going to come up with, because just like you hit those trials and tribulations, and there were some setbacks that even changed the path that you took, and still got you to a great place. So we have to be aware of those trials and tribulations and be able to adapt as well. I think that's another a key point that I picked up from your journey is adaptation.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, just the fact of just seeing the diversity, I think, is important. If you can't see, it's easier to attain something once you see it, and for you to break those barriers down for other, like I said, young kids to look up at that and say, hey, I can do that now. I can be that extremely small percentage that makes it to the Winter Olympics, even if I come from a climate that doesn't necessarily highlight or is advantageous for that sport.
Correct. Yeah, well said. Thank you.
No
It was a pleasure chatting with you, and thanks for sharing my story and letting me talk to all your followers and listeners.
Well, thank you. And again, it was a pleasure to have this interview with Olympian, two-time Olympian, Jazmine Fenlator-Victorian.
This is Jazmine Fenlator-Victorian, two-time Winter Olympian women's bobsleigh, and thank you for listening to the Stay Woke podcast.